I've got something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? Something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talk Gaming. This, our second episode, actually. We've done one of these before this, and if you ever are trying to get back on track, you've missed a couple, feel free to click the little card that's popping up, and that'll take you to the playlist, so you can actually follow the playlist and watch all of them in sequence, so that you never run behind or anything. Also, this show is now completely ad-free, which is awesome. It means that you get like an hour-ish of content every week, which is ad-free, my gift to you. But just the only way we fund this show is through your generosity, your donations. So please check out my Patreon. Don't feel like you have to give, but the link is in the description box below. Anything helps, even if it's just $1 a month. It would mean the world to me. Thank you. That's all I want to say on that. What we're talking about today, we're talking about a bunch of fun-ish stuff that I think is going to be relevant and interesting. The first thing that happened this week that stood out to me and that I found entertaining is CNN, which, if you're not from the United States, is one of the big news networks, like the BBC, essentially. Big news networks in the U.S. And this year especially, they've lost a lot of credibility with roughly 50% of the population. Some polls put it as high as 75% of the population look negatively towards CNN in terms of news coverage. And the reason is because over the course of this past presidential election, they were exposed to be fairly biased and fairly uneven. Now, is that an inherently bad thing? No, people are always going to listen and watch things that they agree with. You probably watch me because I express views that you are sympathetic towards. That's human nature. But they were starting to get called, the Clinton News Network because they only really said pro-Clinton things. They were always pro-Trump. And whether you're pro-Clinton, pro-Trump, doesn't really matter. Either which way, they sided on one side of the aisle. Everyone kind of knew where they were at. And so when this came out, which I'm about to tell you what this was, about 50% of the population really jumped on it and was having a laugh at it. Essentially what they did is they were talking about Russia allegedly hacking the election, as they put it. Now, is that completely fair? No, they don't claim that Russia actually hacked the election, like they hacked in and changed the vote counts. It's not what they're saying. They're saying that they hacked the emails of John Podesta, the campaign chairman for the Clinton campaign, and then leaked those out. And so that's how they kind of hacked the election. Not actually the definition of hacking the election, but nonetheless, that's what they say. And when they were doing this and they were showing the B-roll running these articles, they had Fallout 4 footage, or Fallout footage in general. I don't think it was strictly Fallout 4. I think they also used Fallout 3. But the actual console terminal, when you're hacking into the computers and you're picking the words that match and you're doing that little mini puzzle thing. How anybody, like, they're talking about this serious thing that, they're claiming that a foreign government directly influenced and changed the outcome of a presidential election, electing probably the most powerful person on the planet. And they're using video game footage from Fallout to discuss it and to make their point. I found it funny. It was sent to me by a few viewers and they were like, hey, this is really funny. If you ever want to send me something, by the way, check out my Twitter, send it to me, or my Facebook page. All that's linked in the description box below. And that's how you can contact me directly. I think my current average response time is like 35 minutes. So your odds are pretty good of getting to chat with me really almost instantaneously. So it's worth a shot. But It was just a fun little note. It was a fun thing that happened. Does it matter? Does it discredit CNN? No, it's just a fun thing that happened. It's not every day that you see video game footage being used as an example of, foreign espionage, and it's funny. It was funny to me. And then they try to downplay it like, oh no, we meant to use it. It's not supposed to be serious. It's like, just laugh it off. Say, oh, one of our video editors was a fan of the game, and he searched hacking stock footage, and that's what came up, so we used it. Whatever. It's a funny accident. It doesn't matter in the long run. It's just something that happened, but it was entertaining nonetheless. And with that said, Mass Effect Andromeda was actually announced, given an actual release date. And the reason for this, apparently, was that they got the game to a point where they felt confident in letting their employees try it out. So they sent home builds of the game with their employees over the Christmas break. And so they got back after the Christmas break, and they started looking at the responses from the employees that had taken it home for the holidays, and they said, it's really good. We got a great response. Our employees are happy with it. We're good to go. Give them a release date. So March 31st is when Mass Effect Andromeda is currently set to launch. They say that they feel confident in that release date. I would say that they're going to stick to it, because Lord knows they've put this off for so long. I doubt that they would hold off so long and just push it, and then only to just now, announce a release date and then delay it. I think that would be unfathomable and pretty stupid on their end. But I would believe that they're going to stick to this. Now, they weren't the only game to get a release date, though. South Park: The Stick of Truth was also given a release date. I believe it was on Best Buy's services. I could be wrong. But I believe it was Best Buy. They said that game was being released March 30th, which a lot of people were like, oh, this is awesome. Is this really coming out March 30th? Well, they clarified and they said, okay, no, it's a placeholder date. So it's what we expect it to be released at around that time, but no promises. Now, this brings up something very interesting. The topic of delays in gaming. Delays happen all the time, seemingly a lot more frequently nowadays than they used to, and it's strange. And it harbors this sort of discussion as to whether or not it's a good thing. Should games be delayed, or should you just keep it a secret until you release? And really, I think it's a non-issue. I don't think it's really even worth discussing. So, of course, I'm going to talk about it on my podcast for, 10 or 20 minutes, however long I can manage to ramble about it. But and I'm going to be honest with you, that's what I'm doing. Essentially, like, you look at games, like big title games, like The Last Guardian. I think it was initially shown off like 2009 or something. It was initially a PlayStation 3 game, and they couldn't get the frame rates at even 30 FPS. So what they did is they rendered it out at 2 FPS a second, and then they sped it up 15 times or whatever to get it to 30 FPS. And then they said, this is running off of the PlayStation 3. So yes, it was, but you had to speed it up 15 times to make it look smooth. So it was a little cheating. But what they did is that they said, like, this is amazing technology. We've done all this. It's running at 2 FPS. They didn't tell anybody that, but it was running at 2 FPS at the time. And they just kept delaying. And it got pushed all the way back to this past year, 2016. And when it released, it was like, okay, this is good. I mean, it's been delayed year after year after year, not just month after month, year after year after year. And when it releases, it's a fine game. It's personally not my cup of tea, but some people really enjoy it. They found it good. I saw it at GameStop. There were like, I was trying to find a copy of like Battlefield 1 used, which we'll talk about GameStop later on in this episode. But I was trying to find a copy of Battlefield 1, and I look over and they've got, I couldn't even count. I could have, but they had like 15 copies of The Last Guardian used because people played it and they're like, I'm never playing this again, so might as well give it to GameStop for $10 or whatever, put it towards trading for Dark Souls 3 or whatever. And it was just funny because you don't see a lot of like that many copies of a game within a month of its release. It was kind of bizarre to see. The last game I saw that with was No Man's Sky. People just like, I'm done, take it, I don't want it. But the delays with these games are always bizarre because you would think that they're being delayed because they didn't reach the goal that they had set for themselves, or some unexpected problem came up and they said, okay, we got to push it back. We're not ready. To release it at this point would be a mistake. Push it back. We'll release in 3 months. South Park: The Stick of Truth, set to release December 6th. I was so ready to spend my Christmas break playing that, sending farts through the air and destroying, like ripping a hole in the space-time continuum. As Trey Parker put it, really ripping one. Ripping it so hard that you rip the fabric of space and time. Like I was so ready for it, and then it gets delayed 3 months, apparently, 3 to 4 months if they release any time around their expected release date. And so it's always very disappointing, and it gets gamers upset because we're like, hey, we want what we want and we want it now. You said we could get our game now. We want it now. Give it to us. And then when it doesn't come, we're butthurt. But really, I think you got to think about it on the large scale, what they're doing when they delay it. It's not like they want to. It doesn't help them to delay a game. When they initially announced The Last Guardian, Sony, the publisher, the development studio, their accountants, they were all expecting to release at that first release date and to get the money that they would have gotten from that. Delaying a game months and months and months costs a lot of money. All the staff that has to spend extra time working on it, that has to do extra stuff to catch up to where they're supposed to be. It's a lot of extra work that wasn't expected to have to be done. And so it's not like these studios want to delay games. And I think some people, they act as though they want to, or as if they like messing with these, like their customers. That's not it at all. They want money. Who doesn't? Everyone wants money. They want to give you a product that's going to sell. And if they release a piece of hot trash, usually it won't sell very well. And even if it sells well, it could damage their company's reputation moving forward. As we saw with Assassin's Creed Unity, Ubisoft is still dealing with the fallout from all that stuff. Even now, I make videos about the next upcoming Assassin's Creed, and people are still so critical of anything Ubisoft puts out that even if I'm giving them evidence that they're willing to delay a game by a year or more if it means putting out something that they can be proud of, that their customers are going to like. Even if I show them quotes and evidence that they're actually practicing it, people are still like, nope, Ubisoft game, not buying it. That's real bad. So to delay a game is inherently a gift to the consumer, at least in its intention. At least in its intention. What it can turn into is it can lead to certain development holes, and I think people call it development hell, basically, where a game gets trapped in this middle of the ground state where they never get out of. They're just stuck in this rut of being developed. They're still working on it. Like they're making progress, but a new generation of hardware came out, and all of a sudden they've got to upgrade it and update it for that new generation of hardware. So, okay, we're going to have to spend an extra year working on that. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh crap, well now all these bugs showed up. We got to fix those. Delay it 3 more months. Oh, well then that created some more bugs. Now the graphics aren't up to date with the rest of the competition. We got to redo the engine a little bit. So let's do that. Oh, we lost some of our assets in a flood. Okay, we got to do that. It just leads to one thing after another. What was it? Like Duke Nukem Forever, I think, was delayed for like 10 years. And when it finally came out, it had that 90s sense of humor where everything was just vulgar and gross and frankly really funny, but it pissed a lot of people off because it was out of date by that point. Same with The Last Guardian. People are talking about how beautiful of a game it is. I don't get it. It's not that pretty. It's got that stereotypical thing where when you can't achieve graphics that are really good, they tend to put fog and smoke over it to cover up bad textures or bad draw distances. What was it? It was one of the Resident Evil games. I forget which one it was, but one of the Keystone Resident Evil games. It was known for having this cool fog that made things a lot scarier and more interesting. And they talk about it now and they're like, that wasn't like a creative choice. That was because our draw distances were so horrible that was the only way we could make it look not vomit inducing. Like in Assassin's Creed Unity, I was playing it the other day. I got it for like $5 and I said, you know what? I'll go back and I'll try it. We'll see what happens. And I was walking through the crowd and literally 5 feet away, the long distance models that are like 8 polygons and, you know, they have like a maybe 6 pixel texture to them. They're just now loading in and it's so horrific to even look at. It makes you want to quit the game. Totally immersion breaking. And so what they did is they put this fog in, and that's all The Last Guardian is. It's just like solid, dazed and confused. It's like a Mark Wahlberg movie. It's just there and it's confusing and daisy. I don't know. But it's weird. I don't get why people say that that's a beautiful game. I forget what I was saying, but delays. Like with The Last Guardian, yeah, when it was initially showed off, it was a beautiful thing. It was beautiful. It's like Martha Stewart. She'd be like, it's a good thing. But no, now in 2016, 2017 now, but when it came out in 2016, it was like, it's okay. Clearly you up the textures and you up the frame rate and you said, okay, well, let's add some more feathers to this weird dog bird beak thing. But it's still just not a groundbreaking thing because it was caught in that rut. And that's another thing. Delays inherently keep a game tucked back to where it was initially set to release, especially if it's between generations of consoles. Now, I know there's always the PC Master Race people. I've got a PC. I love playing on it. And for certain games, I won't play those games on anything but PC because it's just a different experience, really. Like Battlefield Battlefield 1. I'll only play it on the PC. I'll only do it because you get better frame rates. It looks better. It's smoother. And for a first-person shooter, I think that's really important. I don't think that's just my opinion. I think that that's just a matter of fact. And for like The Witcher 3, I'll only do it on my PC. Only do it. I just can't stand it on consoles. But consoles define game development and the generations. It's just a matter of fact. The majority of gamers are on consoles. And I mean like what we would consider actual video gamers, not casual gamers. Because if you include Solitaire and Minesweeper, then of course PC is going to outstrip it. But when you're talking about actual people who spend a consistent portion of their budget on video games and gaming, consoles way outstep the PC market. And as a result, they get to kind of say when the graphics take another leap, when the tech takes another leap. And it's unfortunate because PC is like constantly progressing usually. Like the graphics cards are constantly moving forward. And then the consoles are like, well, we're 4 years old, but you got to wait for us to upgrade before you can see that next huge leap in tech and in capabilities, because it's just not worth the developer's time to develop something for the PC and then scale everything back. And in many ways, it's impossible in many instances. One thing that a lot of people don't realize for consoles, usually the defining factor for consoles isn't like their CPU speeds or their, GPU speeds. It's actually the RAM and the memory available. It's a mixture of the RAM, and it's also a mixture of the video RAM, or the video, like VRAM actually. And it's because, you have to have this stuff loaded in and ready. And consoles are surprisingly incredibly low on RAM. It blew me away when I really looked at it and looked into it. The Xbox 360 only has like 512 megs. Like, what? That's insane. Now, to be fair, it's only doing the video game. It's not trying to run a bunch of other stuff like your PC will be. But that's an insanely low number to be able to run a lot of really impressive games that on PC, people are like, well, you need, 4 gigs of RAM to do this. But the consoles are able to do it just like that. And with the next gen consoles, with the PS4s and the Xbox Ones, I think they're sitting at 8 gigs of RAM, which is a huge upgrade. Huge. And I'm hoping for this next iteration, we're going to see even bigger. It's hard to tell, though, because it looks like that we're not going to do the same sort of basically generational upgrades. It looks like they're going to have Project Scorpio, and they're going to have the PS4 Pro. And then I would expect PlayStation in the next 2-3 years to unveil the PlayStation, or the station of playing, or whatever they're going to call it. And that's going to be the console that they run, and they might upgrade that every few years, but it's not going to be like, Xbox One, Xbox 2, Xbox 3. It's that they've said multiple times is over. And as a result of all of this, what does this have to do with delays? I'm not sure. I'm just rambling. But all of this goes back with the generational hardware. When you delay something that was initially announced during like the PS4 generation, and then it gets dragged through to the next generation, it's always going to be caught back there. It's always going to be caught. So when a game like The Last Guardian is delayed for years and years, I personally would prefer that they just cancel it and put that money towards another project that's going to be more interesting or revolutionary, more up to pace or up to par. I'm not sure what the phrase would be. Or at least just start from scratch. And maybe that's what they were doing all those years. Maybe they were like, okay, our PS3 build, it's garbage. We can't use it. We got to start from scratch. Maybe that's what they were doing. In that case, fine. But when they try to constantly hold over this tech time and time again, you end up with something like the Creation Engine that Bethesda Game Studios uses. And universally, it's considered to be just an example of aging. I don't know what you would call it. It's just kind of this monstrosity that's had little bits and pieces stuck onto it year after year after year, release after release after release. And it's tough because to rewrite your engine entirely is, in many cases, just not something you can do. It's incredibly expensive, incredibly time-consuming, requires a huge staff of programmers. It's insane. But when you do this thing where you're using technically the same engine that was used to create Morrowind in 2015, when you release a next-gen game, you're going to run into bugs. You're going to run into all these artifacts, all these traces of old games and of old tech. You just got to start from scratch occasionally and just bite the bullet, recognize that out-of-date stuff is out of date. It's going to be expensive to upgrade and fix, but that's just life. That's just life. One day, the idea of watching a 1080p video like this one is going to be so absurd to people. It's like watching 144p on YouTube, where you're just like, I'm not even going to watch this. This is like having some sort of, colonoscopy with a giant, rusty spoon. It's just bad. I'm not going to do it. Weird analogy, I will grant you. But all of this just to say delays, I think in the grand scheme of things, are good. They aren't inherently bad, but they are incredibly frustrating. And I honestly hope that South Park, The Stick of Truth, or South Park, The Fractured But Whole, is not delayed any further. I need that game. And it's been a habit of South Park games to delay themselves consistently. The Stick of Truth was delayed multiple times, if I remember correctly. And as far as I can gather, that's not a fault of Ubisoft or whatever company is helping them create the game. It's actually the fault of Trey Parker and Matt Stone. That's their names. Trey Parker, Matt Stone. Because they actually have such a busy schedule. They're running a TV show full time, essentially. And then they're also trying to make a video game, write, direct it, everything. That's a lot of work. And so when they're like, hey guys, we're running a little behind, we're going to rewrite this scene. It's tough, but that's just how it is. So if they need an extra 3 months to do it, I'm okay with that. As long as the game that comes out is fun, is entertaining, is good, I'm okay with it. I would rather have a good game than a broken game early, but those are just my 2 cents. I'll be honest, I could not do these longer videos without some caffeine. I would die. But luckily, I thought forward and I got myself an iced something or other before. I love it. Also, this is my green cup. Apparently, it's of Green Guy. He's a pretty cool dude. I don't know what it is or who it is. If you know who or what this is, let me know. But I found it at a store in Estes Park. He sold a bunch of Nordic themed everything, and it's pretty cute. So I recommend telling me what it is, because I don't know. But it's just a cool cup. I don't know. I use it for whatever videos I'm doing when I want to feel fancy. But with that said, I do want to talk a little bit about GameStop, because I have heard a lot of, especially gaming personalities, discuss GameStop in a negative way. They say that GameStop is the bane of the existence of gamers. It causes all the problems that gamers experience, everything from DLC, microtransactions. It is all GameStop's fault. Boogie2988, love him to death, but he's one of the big people that, no pun intended, he's one of the big YouTubers that actually pushes this, and was one of the first people to really call GameStop out on this specific topic. And I would just like to share my thoughts on it. It's been discussed for years now as to the problem with GameStop. And essentially the argument goes like this. They say GameStop is inherently bad for gamers because, one, it does pre-sales. It encourages pre-orders and special bonuses if you pre-order the game. And two, because they sell games used. And the argument goes that the second one, the latter, causes the former. Essentially, the idea is that when you buy a used game, all that money is going to GameStop and not going to the developer that actually created the game. So the game developers are seeing a loss on that game, which if you had bought the game new, or from like an online marketplace or from Steam or something, that they wouldn't have seen. They're losing money on that. They're not getting anything for it. GameStop is getting all the money. So the way that like Boogie would argue for it is that it's losing developers money when you actually purchase a game used. And it causes them to try to make up that difference in budget, that difference in profits and revenue by doing DLC, microtransactions, and all that stuff. There's a problem with this argument, though, which I'm going to offer up, and you can offer your opinion. I might be missing something big, but this is just what I think of it. It's really dry in Colorado, by the way. Really dry. We're like a mile in the air, and so there's like no moisture. Zero. You have to have like 3 humidifiers going in a small room like this one just to avoid getting so dry. There's no moisture. So if you're on the coast, don't talk to me. You're lucky. You and your luscious, oily skin. Oh. Anyway, it causes my throat to be dry. If that seemed like a random point, that's what spurred it on. But GameStop, I think that argument is a little, I don't know. I think it's ignoring a few factors. First of all, you have to remember that a lot of these budget gamers, the high schoolers and college students, they aren't able to buy games at full price. They just aren't. If there's a game they're really looking forward to, they will. But because they want to get the game first, because they want to be the first kid in their group that has the game and everyone's asking them what they thought of it. That's something that happens. But it doesn't happen with every game. It's just not something that happens because games are expensive. $60 is a lot of money. It's just a matter of fact. But they go out and they buy a game used because that's the only way they can get that game. And if the game isn't used, or if the game is too expensive used, they just don't get it. They just don't purchase it. They wait till they can get it cheaper, till the price drops, and then they play it, right? If somebody doesn't buy a game on day one, it's because they're waiting. They're either not interested in the game or they're waiting for it to get cheaper. And so used is just a matter of the cheaper price tag, and they're going to get it. So this idea that if you got rid of used games, that they would go out and buy a new copy, that's inherently not quite right, because they're not purchasing these games because they're too expensive. Now, what Boogie calls out is uses the example in a video he made like 4 years ago, to be fair, but he used the example of an individual who goes into GameStop, says, I want a copy of Dark Souls 3. I want a copy of Dark Souls 3. And they see on the shelf, there's a copy new and there's a copy used right next to it. The new one costs $40 or $39.99. Used copy, it's like $34.99. And they're like, oh, $5. Sure, it's used. It'll still work just fine. Might as well. And so they buy the used copy. And he says the problem with that, you're only saving $5, but the developer is losing $40 on that potential sale. And I'd say, okay, that's fair. That's fair. They're marking it down slightly so that they can make money off of a used product that somebody else has already purchased. So technically that game has been played at least twice. It's been purchased twice. Once new, like we would assume, and the second time used. So the game's been played twice by two different unique customers, but the developer's only seen revenue on one of the copies. And so as a result, they lose money, they need to make it up, blah, blah, blah. Now, I get that, but I would say that that's actually not a very common occurrence. I would say that most people, when they're looking at it, again, if they are going to buy a game that's still that expensive, the $5 differential is not a super common thing unless it's a recent game, unless it's a very recent game, in which case people are probably going to have already purchased it. They're going to buy it on an online marketplace, which is, again, one of the major solutions to this issue. Places like the PlayStation Store or whatever the Microsoft Xbox One store is, or Steam, those go straight to the developers. Steam gets a small cut. And that's a brilliant solution to make it so convenient to purchase it new that they don't even want to bother buying it used. It's so convenient and cheap to get it new that they don't want to bother getting it used. So that point from Boogie and from other like Total Biscuit, that's taken. Point well taken. I'll grant you that one. That is fair. But I would say that that's not super common. Most used game sales, from my personal experience, are games that are 6 months to a year old. They're out of pretty much the running. Anything else that comes new is incidental, right? So with Dark Souls 3, for instance, I purchased this the other day. I finished Bloodborne completely, and I was like, I need a new challenge. I'm going to get Dark Souls 3, which is why Dark Souls 3 is going to be my game of the week. Just if that wasn't clear already, that's my game of the week is Dark Souls 3, and we'll talk about it later. But I wanted to buy this, so I went into GameStop and I looked at the shelf and I saw the difference in prices, and it was, I believe it was like a $15 difference new and used. And I looked at it and I said, okay, for me, the $15 is actually a pretty significant difference. And I looked around to see if they had another copy of the game, another game that I would like to play that was older, that was a little more out of the running, that they maybe weren't even selling a new copy of. But they weren't, and this game was right for me, and I could get the pro member reward thing, so I bought it used. Okay? For me, it's just a budgetary issue. It's just a budgetary issue. If I could buy everything new, I would, but I can't really do that right now, at least. If I can one day, sure, I'll do it, but I can't right now. Now, the solution to this, all these problems, I've been rambling about issues and hypotheticals, but how would we actually deal with something like this? Well, if you look back in the, I believe it was late 90s, early 2000s, and you adjust the prices of those games for inflation today, games cost around $75 to $90 even for an individual copy of a game. Now, does that price sound familiar? Well, yeah, it's what a lot of these sort of special edition packages of these games are for. Like the Elite Edition or whatever of Halo 5 was like $80, and it came with extra skins and stuff. And people get upset because they're cutting stuff out of the game to sell as an extra piece for extra money. Yeah. Yeah. It's because the price has gotten stuck at $60. In the UK, in Australia, I think Australia is the worst in terms of game prices. You're paying $90 to $110 for a new game. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And the developer certainly isn't getting all of that. But you're spending a lot of money in these other countries for these games. But in the US, where most of this money is coming from, they're stuck at $60. And the idea of raising it, the average price to like $75, is just unheard of. It's insane. But I personally would be okay with paying $75 on day one for a new game if it's the entire game, if it's a game I'm really excited for that they've put all the work into, that's not going to have all these bugs on day one. I'd be okay with doing it. If they announce Bloodborne 2 or Dark Souls 4 and it comes out this summer, I'm fine with giving $75 to play the game, reward them for their hard work, and do that. I'm okay with it. $15 isn't going to break the bank. A couple months down the road, you could get it used or maybe get it on the PlayStation Store for, I don't know, $50, $60. That's okay. I'll manage. We just have gotten so used to the $60 price tag that it's holding everything back. As time has progressed, the price has gotten sticky. And that's a problem for these developers, because as the expenses go up with inflation rises, cost of living rises, everything else, all the other expenses raise themselves and everything gets more expensive, including the game development in general. But their max price that they can charge is still stuck at 60. So they have to make up that difference in any way they can, other than just raising that price, as you would with basically any other product. A new car back in 1970 cost you a few grand or whatever. Now it costs you tens of thousands of dollars for a brand new, beautiful car. But that's because inflation increased. That's because other expenses increased. The technology's improved, but other things, quality of life improved. The value of the dollar changed. All of these things go into it. So now you pay more dollars for it. If you were still stuck at having to charge, $5,000 for a brand new car, you would have to make up that difference in a lot of different ways. And you probably couldn't. You'd have to sell it in a package. Okay, you get the body of the car for $5,000, but if you want the wheels, then you got to pay an extra $10,000 to make up that difference. Like, that's how you'd have to look at it. And that's basically what's going on with the gaming community right now, is the price is stuck. So they are trying to find other ways to fill that gap. And I try to support it any way I can. And if the DLC is one way of doing it, fine. If I buy this game used, I'm still paying full price for the DLC on the PlayStation Store. I'm doing whatever else I can to support them there that I wasn't able to do here. So, it's whatever you can do to help it. But I think GameStop inherently is not a bad thing. They have done some stupid stuff in the past, but they've moved back and they've said outlandish things, and then they pull it back and they're like, well, no, that was just one stray executive, blah, blah, blah. I'm okay with it. They seem to have a good business model. They provide used games to players that can't pay for their hobby otherwise. Like me, to be quite frank, I wouldn't be able to play a lot of these games that I have unless it were for used copies. It just wouldn't be possible. I'm not able to buy all these games new like, a 25-year-old with some sweet job can do, or like a YouTuber that has a lot of money can do. I know I'm a YouTuber, but I certainly don't have a lot of money. So all of this just to say, I'm okay with GameStop. I don't think you should villainize them. I don't think you should boycott them whatsoever. I think they're actually doing a huge service to the gaming community in providing a means to participate in the activity to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to. I think that's a very good thing, and I think it's something that they don't get a lot of credit for, because they're seen as just money hoggers that are just taking advantage of the system. But really, they're just offering used games. Sure, like if you go and I try to sell this back to them after I finished it, if I bought it for $30, they're only going to give me 5 or 6. Yeah, because they have to buy it from you. They have to do the paperwork on it. They have to pay their employee to do the paperwork on it. Then they got to put it back on the shelf and then wait for somebody else to come in and buy it, which might never happen, but they have to wait for that to happen. Somebody else will buy it. They make a profit. They put that back into the store. It's business. This insane idea, all these YouTubers complaining, they're like, I took in my copy of Dark Souls 3 and they only gave me $10 for it. I paid $50. Yeah, you numbskull. Like, yeah, of course they're not going to pay you full price. They're not going to give you $45 to try to make up this, like, only make 50 cents off the sale if they sell it. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills right now. Of course, in an ideal world, we would all get all of our money back and it would be like free gaming. Pay $50 for a game, play it over a weekend, then go back and sell it back to them. And it's like nothing ever happened. It's just, yeah, no, I played the game, but it was basically free. Just returned it. No, not how it works. Not how it works. Sorry, not sorry. Next thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about PlayStation, specifically Sony and the PS4, and how the PS4 has essentially completely dominated and won the console wars. It just won. It just won. If you're an Xbox fanboy, I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad you're watching. I appreciate you and your likes and your subscription and your comments and all that. But your platform just lost. Lost. And that's fine. If we admit that, then they can move forward and make progress. But they lost. Sony demolished them. How on earth did that happen? Well, I have a few ideas. And let me share them with you. Number one, the launch of the Xbox One was probably one of the most atrocious and botched releases of a product ever. Like the example I gave last week on this show with whatever his name was. Even if I could remember, I don't think I'd even want to say it because I don't want to give him credit of popularity or of people knowing who he is. A really disgusting creature. But basically what he did is he was the head of the Xbox division. And he isn't currently. He was booted out. But he was the head during the whole release of the Xbox One. And he was the one that was instigating all these software policies. Things like always-on functionality. That's what they would call it, always-on functionality. Really, it's a restraint. It's not a functionality. It's a restraint. The consoles and gaming wouldn't work on the console if it weren't connected to the internet. The reason they wanted that is so that they could constantly run ads on your dashboard 24/7. And if you weren't connected to the internet, then sorry. So they wanted to completely avoid somebody who just wants to play games on their console, has like a Roku or a smart TV or anything else to watch Netflix or YouTube on. So they turn Wi-Fi off and just game on it so they don't have to deal with the ads. They want to avoid that. They don't want to give you freedom as a customer. What is that? That's insane. So what do? They make it so it doesn't even work if you're not connected to the internet. And people were like, what the heck is this? Like, I'll be connected a lot of the time, but people in rural areas, people who just don't want to connect their device to the internet, or people overseas, soldiers who are overseas fighting for our freedom, our liberty. Like, what are they going to do? They don't have a consistent or sturdy internet connection. Are you telling me that after a long, hard day's work, like, fighting ISIS in Raqqa or something, and then they want to get back to the camp and they just want to relax and play a game of Madden with their bros, you're telling me they couldn't do that because they weren't connected to the internet? And this mongrel, this piece of garbage that looks vaguely like all the gunk you pull out of the shower drain. He's got sporadic hairs and dandruff all over. Smells kind of like, I'm not going to say that. Never mind. See, I have a filter. I swear I do. Anyway, but this disgusting waste of human trash says, well, then the Xbox just isn't for them. Like, oh, well, our product isn't made for them. They should just not play it. No. It's like you have the gall to tell an American audience and an American public and customer base that their armed forces and their armed military men and women who are defending their rights and their freedoms, the Xbox, no, they shouldn't be able to play it. No, we're not concerned with them. Who cares if they can play? Now, as a company, of course, they're free to do whatever the heck they want. But in the free market, we have the ability to say yes or no, yay or nay. Yes, that's a good policy. No, that's a bad policy. With the most powerful thing known to man. Do you know what it is? This thing. Your wallet. This is what can move mountains. It smells kind of weird. I got a faint whiff while I was holding it here. It's probably because it's near my butt all day. But this thing has the potential to change the world and the course of history simply because this is their bottom dollar. This is what defines their success, their, successes and failures. This is what makes or breaks them. And so this is your biggest weapon. Even if there's not much in it, this is your biggest weapon. And when used en masse, it can do wonders, as we saw with the destruction of the Xbox One sales numbers. It was frankly hilarious. It was a pure example of karma. They also had other seemingly anti-consumer policies that people were not happy about, and they refused to fix it or adjust it. With, for instance, the Kinect, saying that the Kinect had to always, you probably don't even remember the Kinect, but the Kinect, the thing that would read you and, you could say, Xbox, turn on, and it would turn on, and it would read your physical motions so you could wave to, like, open up the dashboard or whatever. I don't even remember. We had one. I think we disconnected it, and I think it's in a box somewhere. But they said it had to be connected all the time. And it had to be turned on. And if you put a Post-it over the camera so it couldn't see you, the Xbox wouldn't work. It would put up a warning screen and you couldn't get rid of it until it read you. Now, not only is that creepy and Orwellian and weird, they're like, we have to be able to see you and hear you. Otherwise, it won't work. Like, you can't play your games, you can't watch Netflix, you can't do anything unless we can watch you do it. That's a little weird. And they never really offered a full reason as to why that was needed, but nonetheless, that was their policy. And after the first sales reports were coming in and customer interest and like people expressing whether or not they were going to buy a PS4 or an Xbox, after those first numbers came in, all of a sudden, believe it or not, they changed the policy. They said, oh, well, we just figured out a way to get this patch in so that you can play even if you don't have a Kinect connected. And you can play even if you're not connected to the internet. They just magically figured that out. It's amazing how that works. But that's because people were voting with their wallets and they said no. Now, the most recent sales numbers that we have access to as consumers shows that Sony is at least minimum sold twice as many PS4s as Microsoft has sold Xbox Ones. That's crazy. And of course, we won't know the exact numbers. Sony doesn't release to the public the exact numbers. But what we do know is that Sony has come out and said in public blog posts and press conferences that they don't view Microsoft and the Xbox as their competitor anymore, as their chief competitor. They don't see them as a competitor. You know who they do? The PC market. Now, you have to feel so confident in your console. It's just so unbelievably confident in it, in your product, and in your lead above your other competition in the console market to go after the behemoth of PC gaming as your true threat, which is what their 4K and higher frame rate feature set is targeting. They're targeting the professional gamers, which it worked for me. It worked for me. Look at me. I'm a PC gamer at heart. I love the PC market, but there were games that I really wanted to play, like Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, The Last of Us, the new God of War that'll be coming out. What is it? Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, those games look amazing. Amazing. And I want to play them. Didn't have a console, though. And I was like, oh, well, the PS4 seems like the closest thing I can get to a PC without just buying another PC and still getting to play all these cool exclusives. And so it was the perfect thing. It was the perfect thing. Again, a viewer sent me this, but it was because I was saying that if I was going to get a console, I would get a PS4. And it was amazing. Thank you again, if you're watching this, for getting me the PS4. I love you. I will love you forever. But this is the thing, is they've successfully gotten so far ahead of Microsoft that they're saying we're not even worried about them anymore. We don't even have to worry about them coming in and stealing part of our market share. We're just going to go for the kingpin of all kingpins, the thing that is so far ahead of consoles in terms of tech and capability. We're going to start going after them because we're so confident that we're ahead of these guys. That's crazy. That is very confident, and it would suggest that they are miles and miles ahead of where Xbox is. And really, it's the perfect example of what happens when you, one, rest on your laurels. The Xbox 360 did incredibly well after a botched PS3 release, where it was super expensive, and then Sony tried to correct it, and they were losing money when they were first selling the PS3, and they tried to correct it, but they never really caught up. And then Xbox got full of themselves and tried to do these stupid policies that weren't good for anybody but Microsoft. And so consumers said, nope, we're going to go with PlayStation. We're going to go with Sony. They have better games. They have exclusives, which is seemingly, I know this isn't an exclusive, but still I held it up for some reason. It seems like they completely ignored exclusives on the Xbox side. All of Xbox's exclusives, at least for me, I look at them and I'm like, okay, it's not my thing. A couple racing games, Halo, I'll live without it. Like, I just don't understand why that's such a big thing. But apparently that's their deal breaker. With the PlayStation, the exclusives have sold so many consoles. It's insane. I know 3 different people that bought a PlayStation 4. They bought a new console just so that they could play The Last of Us, Uncharted 4, Until Dawn, all these exclusives, Horizon Zero Dawn, all these exclusives that they wouldn't have gotten to play otherwise. They bought a console for it. They were willing to spend hundreds of dollars to get into the console market just for that. That is crazy. That's how far ahead, and that's why exclusives, I think, were one of the major deal breakers that doesn't get talked about a lot when you're talking about the console wars. Weirdly. I'm not sure why, because for me, it's one of the biggest things that I think completely changed the game and put Sony way ahead of Microsoft. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. Nonetheless, Sony has proven that they are just demolishing Microsoft in the console wars. And the response we've seen from Microsoft is not to directly compete with Sony, but instead to work on this blending of their platforms. Microsoft owns, in some ways, the PC market because with Windows, that's really seen as the only avenue for gamers who want PCs. They have to get a Windows computer. That's just how it is. You're not buying a Mac to game. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to create this one platform thing where they blend the two, where they make it so any game you buy on the Xbox, you can buy or you can play on PC and vice versa. But you have to have bought it through their whatever Windows service, whatever it is. Now, that's a lofty thing to do. If they can get Steam to somehow support it or get a deal with Steam so they take like 20% of each sale for the Xbox compatible games or whatever, that could be interesting. I'm not sure if Steam would do that, but that could be interesting. In which case, maybe they could catch up in some ways. But here's the thing. If somebody has a PC there that they can play all these Xbox exclusives, why would they bother pulling out the Xbox or going in the living room and doing it when they could just stream or set up a PC next to the TV if they're really that concerned about it? Like, it's not even, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And they say that they strongly believe this is where gaming is heading, a unified platform where you do all this. But I think they misunderstand PC gamers as a whole. Most PC gamers, the only reason they would consider getting a console is so that they could play the games that they couldn't on PC. The exclusives. Games like Uncharted 4, like God of War, like The Last of Us Part 2. Games like these that look incredible, that are incredible, that are super fun. But Microsoft, once they take away those exclusives, there's no reason to really go at it. There's no reason to really pursue it because it's just, it's all one thing. I mean, it's kind of stupid. It's like people who don't have a 4K TV who would see no improvement in improving from the PS4 to PS4 Pro. It would be the same thing. It's the same product basically, and expecting them to buy a PS4 Pro because it's all unified, because you can play the same games across it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But nonetheless, that's what Microsoft believes. And I think it's an example of them kind of faltering and realizing that they're in trouble and they might be, in the words of Princess Diana, completely and utterly screwed. That's not a real quote, just in case you were wondering. But nonetheless, Sony has completely won the console war. Completely. I'm not even sure if they can lose at this point. I'm not even sure. The only way they could lose is if they pull a Microsoft and get so uppity about it that they just start all these anti-consumer policies and say, well, no, you need to be connected all the time. We released this new, giant whatever hat that you have to wear, or like you have to buy a PS4, like PSVR. You have to buy that with your console. You can't buy a new console without it. Or your PS4 won't work unless you have one plugged in. That's basically the equivalent of what Microsoft was doing with the Kinect. Albeit a little more expensive, but nonetheless, that's what they were doing essentially. And if Sony starts to do something like that to push another product, then they're going to have the potential to lose customers as a result of it. I know I would get frustrated if they said, you got to go spend $600-700 on another product to use the one you already have. That would be I'm not going to say problematic because that's a word I hate more than life itself. It's horrendous. Don't use the word problematic. Losers use the word problematic. If you can't express what you're actually trying to say, you say that's really problematic. It's a word for weak people. But with that said, it's problematic. No, I'm kidding. We'll stop there. But what I want to just, my point being, Sony has won the console war. And so I haven't talked to anybody in the past year that when they say, yeah, I'm thinking of getting a console, I'm like, oh, which one? I haven't heard a single person say Xbox. Not a single person. And I live and breathe gaming. Basically, the only thing I talk to people about is gaming. And I haven't come across a single person that's going to get an Xbox. And I'm sure it's reflected in their sales numbers. I'm sure of it. It's why they're really relying on Scorpio. We'll see how that turns out. If it can really push out some amazing graphics, I might revise my claim. And if it's a PC competitor, we'll see. But I doubt it. I'm open-minded, though. We'll see what happens. My game of the week. As I said, Dark Souls 3. Souls games are not for everybody. As I've expressed before, when I went into GameStop, the cute little girl there that was working, I said this on the counter, and she's like, oh, Dark Souls 3. Do you know about the Souls games? Like, as if I was buying some sort of drug that has horrible side effects. Like, do you know what this can do to you? You got to be careful with it. That's like what it was like. But it's because it's not for everybody, and it does take perseverance. And I talked about Bloodborne last week. I'm talking about Dark Souls 3 this week. I'm on a From Software binge right now. I can't get enough of it. Mainly it's because the level design is incredible. It's fun. It's engaging. This isn't a console exclusive, by the way. You can play this on PC, and I highly recommend that you do. It is a blast. It is so much fun. And on PC, I'm sure you'd have a better experience. I'm experiencing some frame drops, which in a game like this is literally the difference between life and death. So if you can play it on PC and get even better, more consistent frame rates, you'll have a great time. It is so much fun, and it's rewarding. Not many games are able to make you feel incredibly satisfied beating a boss on the first try or on the 35th or 37th or 100th time. Not many games can do that, but this game and From Software's games can, because it's like a little community. You have to earn your place in it, and you work your butt off, and you spend hours and hours and hours. And when you can tell somebody, I finished Bloodborne, as I told the girl at GameStop, she was like, oh, really? Okay, yeah, no, you'll enjoy this. This is fun. I can't play this. Would you like our special warranty that covers, rage quits and damage for that? Which they actually have, by the way. They have a special warranty for rage quits. I don't even know how you would damage this if it's in your console, but apparently they've had people like drop kick their PlayStations over games like these, destroying the disc, but they can at least get a repair on the disc or get a replacement disc because they got the warranty, which just blows my mind. I've never been a rage quitter. I'll gently set the controller down and take a walk, but I've never thrown something. I don't get that. I don't know. One day maybe I'll experience that, but as of right now, I have not. I'm not one of those people. But that's my game of the week. Leave your hashtag game of the week in the comment section below. Again, that lets me know that you have watched the entire video to the end. It just helps me see and filter through the real, hardcore comments that have watched the entire video. So do that. I also put these up on SoundCloud now. I'll put a link to that in the description box below as well. So if you want to listen to this while you're doing stuff, you can do that. Just another way of you absorbing the content. But what else? I was going to say, oh yes, a giveaway. I'm going to be giving away, I believe, 5 random, I'm not going to announce them, basically 5 Steam games. I'm not responsible for you having a Mac and not being able to play the Steam game. So if you win somehow and then you don't have a PC and then you're like, well, I can't play this game, give me another one. Sorry, you got to have I'm not responsible for that. If you have a PC, though, you'll be set. They're just going to be codes that you basically put into Steam, and it automatically renews the game. So it'll be a blast. I'm going to do this 5 different games to 5 different people. If you want to enter for a chance to win one of them, all you've got to do is go over to my Facebook page, again, linked in the description box below. Just like it and leave a little comment on the wall of the Facebook page. That's how you'll officially enter. And then I'll announce the winner there, message you, and I'll send you the code and everything, and it'll be great. But this just allows me to actually, drive some people over there so that when I announce other giveaways and things, we can do that. Super fun. Super fun. We're having a great time. We're just having a blast. And again, this podcast is ad-free, no ads on it. I detest ads, and I wish I could go completely ad-free, but for a lot of reasons, I've got to do that. I made a video about it. But the only way that this thing gets paid for is through your generosity, through Patreon. So even if you can only give $1 or the price of a cup of coffee every month, it's only once a month is all you're doing. Even if it's just $1 a month, that still helps me out a lot, because a lot of people watch these. So if all of you gave $1 a month, this show would go live. It would go platinum. It would go whatever podcasts do. It would improve so immensely thanks to your generosity. So I hate begging and asking for money. I don't like ads, but this is just how we do. Your generosity, your support. If you like the content, you can support it. If you don't, you don't have to. And even if you like the content, don't feel forced to. You don't have to. Rely on other people's generosity. That's what I'm doing. But with that said, guys, thank you for watching. If you like this episode, hit the like button. We're trying some different formatting stuff. The camera angle is different. Everything's different. Let me know what you thought of this format down below. I'll appreciate all the feedback I get. We're still figuring this out, so anything you leave is helpful. But I love each and every single one of you more than you could possibly know. And I'll speak to you guys again very, very soon. Peace out. Love ya. Bye.